Welcome back to another episode of CCW Insider, where we talk about the matches and stories from wrestling's last territory. My name is Ryan Joy, and I run minutestobelltime.com, a website and database tracking pro wrestling around the world. On today's episode, I'm bringing you part 2 of my interview with CCW senior referee Bruce Owens. We're going to kick things off talking about his interactions with Andre the Giant. This is a great interview. The first part was really great. Go back and listen to that now. Or when you're done listening to this one. But here he is, part 2 of my interview with Bruce Owens.
Yeah, when Andre would come to Florida, well, first of all, most people when they're young, they sit there and buy. I had like one fast car and Chevelle 396, but in wrestling, man, the guys with the big cars are the guys where the main eventers would go with in that day, and back then I was like, man, I'm going to buy the biggest car I can afford. And I had this Dodge Polara, which was like one of those giant police cars, but it was probably bigger. So, when Andre came in, like a lot of the guys, they didn't want, because Andre went in, the seat went all the way back. And this is before bucket seats, So the whole seat went back, and if the boys were in the back seat, they got their knees in their chest, and so Eddie would always just say, what towns can you get with the Giant and everything? And then, also when Killer Carl Cox was in, he had a big car. So that would be my break from driving. I'd pick Andre up in my car, then switch him over to Killer Carl Cox's car, because Cox had more money for gas, yet the Andre always paid me for everything, So I skimped a little on that one, but Andre was simply a blast, If he liked you, he would call you boss, and you have to understand, and I may have sent you a picture. If not, I will. I was like, back then, I was like 140 pounds, 6 foot, soaking wet. And, I'm with Andre, and like, I'm going to restaurants, like, there's all these knives and forks. I didn't know, man. I knew there's a knife, fork, and a spoon. Now I'm in this restaurant with 2 sets of the silverware and all these extra plates and glasses and tablecloths and everything. And, Andre was just the time of my life, and just a sincere human being. I mean, just, as good as they come. But like, Andre didn't speak English when I first would, haul him around, So like, this goes back to days. And again, you got to remember, we're back in the 70s and stuff. So go check in a hotel, and ring the bell and stuff. And this is a hotel, like, with 100 rooms. I wasn't a little hotel, and Andre didn't understand a thing, So depending if I had a few beers or something, first I'd go ahead and I would have to check him in and everything. And that was the paper check-in and everything. I'd go up, say, I need a room for this big dumb bastard. I'd smile at him. He'd smile back. And they'd look at me like I was nuts. And remember, I'm 140 pounds soaking wet, 6'1", and kind of my worst thing one time was I had a young lady with me, and I ended up, there was only one king bed and the other were single beds. And since Andre didn't understand English, I took him to his room and I gave him the single beds, and I had the king bed. Well, I didn't think about it, because a few beers later, everything, and the night was over. Andre knocked on my door, and, I opened the door, and Andre saw the king bed, and he went a little crazy. And I said, Andre, no, man. I didn't even have a room. I was in my car. They gave me the room later when someone checked out, and he always wondered, every once in a while he would say to me, do you have a room or not? I said, Andre, look, man, they didn't even charge me, because I went down and told the guy, look, I'll pay you. Don't say anything. Say the room was free, but as far as drinking and eating, you can't believe it. Everything you hear about Andre and what he did. I was with him in Dallas. He had over 100 beers, because that's when they used to ring the cash registers in at the airport bar, and they give you a little paper receipt. And I saved them all and counted them on the airplane. He was going from Dallas to Miami, back to Tampa. Food, nothing for him to take 15 Whoppers, 15 fries, 5 Cokes, 10 Cokes, onion rings. He'd just say, fill a bag this big. And they would usually we'd go to Burger King, say, load up the bags, and we'd go out and pay whatever it would be. But unbelievable, like what he could eat or drink. He could drink 2 bottles of vodka, nothing. One time we took him for barbecue, and we were in Homestead, Florida for wrestling, and he was a battle royal, and he had 9 bottles of wine. We picked up 3 more at Publix. He did the battle royal, and then he drank the other 3 back to the commercial airport. But he had 9 bottles of wine before the battle royal.
Wow.
But it was like nothing. It never fazed him.
So I think about a guy that size and like the size of cars and things like that. Did it after you bring Andre around for a while? I mean, is there extra maintenance that you're doing on your vehicle? Because like he's such a big guy.
What's amazing? It is not really, because I had the big cars and they had like that police suspension on them, for car chases. But I mean, gas mileage, you'd notice the difference because, back then cars were getting like 12 miles to a gallon and stuff. I mean, it's a whole different time, and fuel efficiency and everything. So, I mean, you could go from 12 to 8 or 9 with Andre. I do know, always remember stopping for gas multiple times.
Now, backing up a little bit, you had mentioned that you had done, how you got into announcing. You just kind of like walked into it after you picked the dead guy's tie. I just like when you said that, like, I just can't imagine having no like voice training or anything for announcing, and you just kind of got in there and picked your spot and made the best of an opportunity, I guess.
Okay. I was this young guy that was shy to talk in front of class, talk to girls, go to bars or anything. But Frank Freeman had told me, he says, nobody knows that you've never done this before unless you tell them. Mm-hmm. And now, because Frank was always in a good suit, his regular business, he had a real estate business, so he was always in a suit and tie. So, the crowds were hot. They'd throw things, mustard, hot dogs, Coke, sodas, beers, everything. I mean, that's when the people walked around selling, the guy carried the tray of sodas and beer and would sell them. So Frank never wanted to get hit with the stuff. And, there was always going to be a couple of hot finishes during the night. So I always called the finishes, they announced the finishes, the winner and new heavyweight champ or whatever it was. So I always did that. So really it was only for me to transition to the introduction.
Okay.
And since everybody had always known me, like in Florida when I first started, and I mean, I worked all the way down to Key West and everything like that. It was easy because I knew all these people just, because sometimes they have kids, I get them in the back, get a picture, get an autograph or something for them. And, so if I went to like Key West, or now I'm in Palm Beach or Fort Pierce, Orlando, and this place is like, everybody just thought, oh, he must be one of their announcers, because remember back then, there's no internet, there's nothing. It's just, he's the ring announcer from Championship Wrestling from Florida.
Yeah.
And I have my little introduction about, and proudly representing the National Wrestling Alliance this evening. I'm your ring announcer, and I went by Bruce Michaels as a referee, and then Bruce Owens as an announcer. And ironically, when I was a ring announcer, I had my hair combed to the side, and you have to visualize that. And when I was a referee, Bruce Michaels, my hair was parted down the center. People would say, like, God, you look almost like the guy, that's the ring.
Yeah.
And I have a twin, but I told you earlier, it was a twin sister. But I had Bruce Michaels and Bruce Owens. My real name is Bruce Michael Owens. But I was, my hair was parted different for being a announcer. And then, when you're wearing referee stripes, you look totally different than you do in a suit. So, I've fooled a lot of people for a long time. And then like some go, oh my God, I know it was you. And I was like, yeah, the same person that told me I looked like the guy, Now all of a sudden, because I told you.
That's Clark Kent level.
Yeah, really. I didn't have glasses and I could actually see.
Yeah. So another story from my side. I was telling another one of the referees from CCW, Adrian, about how I was doing some research, and I turned on Clash of the Champions from 1988, Miami Mayhem, and I'm watching it to just to kind of see what was going on at that time. And Tony Schiavone's is doing the commentary with Bob Caudle, and he says send it out to our ring announcer Bruce Owens, and then I like paused the TV and I'm like, is that? And sure enough, it was you.
Yeah.
So it's like, do you have any specific memories from that? I mean,
Oh
that
yeah.
was a big show that
Oh
you
yeah.
were
There's.
announcing.
I give you a couple good ones. First of all, if you ever watch me as a ring announcer on my tapings, um, I always weighed certain guys in at a half pound or 3/4 pounds or quarter pound.
Yes. Yep.
Couple on the card to try to make it legitimate. And Jim Crockett came up to me and said, that's really neat. And I was like, he was watching the tape, and I says, what? And he said, the quarter pound, half pound deal. And I says, oh, I just wanted to do it one time and always figured I'd do, one or two on the card to try to make things look legitimate for the weigh-ins and stuff. And he thought that was the greatest thing ever. And I was like, well, like I'm known for quarter pound or half pound, but that was a super day. There's a couple things. When Luger hits the limousine,
Yep.
JJ blades him because Luger would never blade. Um, and once I did Luger, where he took a post when it was championship wrestling from Florida. He wouldn't cut himself, so I had to do it. I've bladed, a few times myself, and but Luger was scared to. But I actually made it on that yacht, the Kitty Hawk, I think it was, or
Yep.
something.
In Palm Beach
I
was what they.
made it on the yacht, and it wasn't because I was really invited. Is because somebody flew into Miami instead of West Palm Beach, and they
Wow.
needed a ride. And I says, if I'm going on the Kitty Hawk, you got to ride. You decide. And I got on the Kitty Hawk,
Oh, that's awesome.
and so I did one part where I walked by when I knew they were taping in the back where like my head would be in those windows. So
Okay.
like if they edited that, but they didn't use that one because they did a couple takes. But I thought that would be cool to see me going by and because
Sure.
I just kind of gave a glance and but I never stopped, just kept on walking. But yeah, that was man. When you're a kid from Hialeah growing up and you end up on a yacht like that, that's big time.
With Ric Flair, the
Oh,
Four
everybody.
Horsemen.
Ollie, Jay, Arn, everybody. And,
Yeah.
that's who you just saw on the tape, but two-thirds of that card was on that boat or yacht.
Okay.
Sorry,
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's it's incredible. I guess when and here we are, and like fast forward and now like many years, I guess. But let's talk about CCW and how did you? I guess I mean you started back in the '70s, you carried into the '80s. CCW starts. CCW just had their 18th anniversary, so they started in the 2000s. How did you get involved with CCW?
Okay. I've never stopped working, you know.
Mhm.
Probably the longest time I didn't work would maybe be 3 week period or something, 4 week period, when the territories closed, involved the indies start and everything. So I always work, but like in the days when, the big wrestling, I used to sneak guys in, Gangrel, Bruno, these different guys. I used to sneak these kids in. They were kids.
Okay.
They'd all be in the back and everything. And I would say like, grab my bag or grab this, or, as the announcer, grab the garment bag and just walk fast and stay with me like you belong. As soon as we get near that curtain, give me the bag and step out, go up to the cheap seats and stay there and don't move because otherwise they're going to throw you out. And, so that's how I knew a lot of them, and they start their own company and, hey, can you work? Hey man, I'm local. Sure. I'd be glad to.
Mhm.
And, um, I just never burned any bridges, showed up earlier on time. You know, um, Back in the Florida days, I had a pilot that had a Cessna. He wanted hours. All I had to pay for the fuel on the plane. So I had an airplane to go to different towns where I could fly in, fly out, be home at night by midnight, and still go to jobs and everything. in the daytime, and it just never ended. I would have never, I was satisfied like when I got in the business. Obviously, I'm thinking it's going to last forever, but when I seen the territory starting to die and everything, and Eddie Graham always told me, Bruce, don't go in this full time, because he says work 4 or 5 days a week or something. Don't go 7 days, even though there's times I did do 7 days with TV and a double shot 9 times a week. Sometimes we did 9 times a week. Um, but he says, don't give up aviation, because, Eddie was a pilot. Plus, he knew I was making decent money, and he knew that, Eddie had the vision. I was living off of the dream and the stardom. Eddie was living off of reality for me. And he always looked down for me, just like Mike Graham did, and Hiro Matsuda and Duke, Buddy Colt that owned the promotion. Briscoes that had a piece of it too. Um, I was just lucky. And, I got like 10 years, then like 11, 12, and then it's like 20, and then 21, 22, and 25, and 30, and 31. And I have no idea how it went. I cannot explain, because, like, I saw Flair. We did a Comic-Con thing, and they did the cosplay wrestling and everything. And Flair was there, and we bumped into each other in the Marriott. And I was walking through. I never saw him, and he just yelled, "Bruce!" And he's like, "What are you doing here? Are you doing aviation?" I said, "No, I'm refereeing." He's like, "Oh my God," And this was a couple of years ago, so I was probably at about 46 or something, 46 years, and I'm 67, still trying to stay healthy. I got some herniated disc, and I get that laser treatment every 6 months that, tricks my brain into not feeling the pain till the nerves regenerate. And, I want to get 50. I don't know beyond 50, but I'm just having fun. A lot of people have friends that they're like at my age, they're old, they're 67, they're older, they're dying. I got a lot of friends in the wrestling business that, I see a lot, but then there's like, a good 10 to 15 that I stay in touch in their personal life and everything, and they're younger. And, so I'm surrounded by mostly young people. And my wife is 48. So I don't have these people on Geritol hanging around my house and everything, and surrounded with people that, are pretty much 30s, 40s, and 50, and so I've just been real lucky.
Yeah. We talk about talking with you. We're talking a lot about the territory days and into the NWA and stuff. And CCW calls themselves the last territory, and I think it's interesting because most indies nowadays, they're going to run, and there's nothing wrong with this, but they run maybe once a month or once every couple of weeks. CCW is running every weekend, almost multiple shows per weekend. And I wondered about your perspective about why CCW, you think, using all the experience that you've had over these years, why do you think the CCW is able to maintain a schedule like that, and they still have the fans that continue to come back?
I think it's a couple things. Is the buildings are good buildings. um God, I can't even remember last time I did an outdoor show, but I think what's happened is they built year over year. There's credibility and there's honesty. And when I say honesty, I want to point that is this direction. When we rent a building, we pay the building. And if something accidentally got damaged, we pay for it. And we leave the building the way we got it. And the people have to clean up the building, do minimal work. That allows you to go back time and time again, or go to that same building who, for some reason, maybe, it's owned by a city or a school, and they say, "Hey, we're not doing these type of events," or "We've got this booked for the next 6 months." And you say, "Well, I need a letter of referral," and they'll write that letter gladly that, "Hey, you're a good tenant for the evening. You clean up, you don't damage things, and you respect everything." But the credibility, I think, comes over year. The product is good, because you can do all the other things. If the product's not good, it's not. We don't put people in the ring that aren't safe and that can really perform, because at the end of the day, you're supposed to go see professional wrestling. That's why there's a school. Until you're ready, you stay in the school. If I put a bunch of students in there that can't wrestle, and the exception is sometimes we do the battle royal, and the battle royal is not like in the old days where it was the last match, or or the semi-main event to a. The only thing would be in place with a lights out non-sanctioned match in the old
Right.
NWA days. But you'll see some of the students that are pretty close to being ready to go on their own with the veterans and in a battle royal. But it's the first match. So it gives them some exposure, let them feel the crowd because you can literally, if you've done this, you'll be in the ring. You can feel the pulse of the crowd when you're in there and stuff. And obviously, it's a lot different when there's either a tag team or two guys in the ring with the referee. But that's what it is. You get a decent product. And when you buy a ticket, you get your money's worth and more. Um, I've been invited to go to some shows. I've, never had to buy a ticket. But, I go and like sometimes, they ask me, what do you think? I said, I always think that, no matter what, everybody can do better. That's always, don't ever think you've gotten there. But some places just have too far to go or they've never built the consistency of, it could be running every 2 weeks, then it's running every 3 weeks. Then there's a 2 or 3 month nothing happening. Then we come back again, and that comes down to running it. It comes down to money. You have to have the money to run the business, and for us to do all these shows, there's the money that's backing it. So I mean, without the money to go ahead and rent 2, 3 buildings on a weekend, you're not going to do this. Consistency is another thing. You won't go to a CCW show and say, "Oh, that was just terrible. I'm never going back." Um, and the talent's there, and I really believe that the product you see, and that they're putting it's on TV and several networks. You don't put your stuff on TV if it isn't TV ready.
Right.
And they are on a lower scale. We're not AEW or WWE. We're a promotion within the state that travels out of the state to different cities, and we do the same thing whether we're in Nashville or in the state of Florida. Nashville's a great town. I've been up there several times refereeing, but again, you got to please those people. Whoever gives you their money, if you don't give them their money's more worth than a little bit more, they're not going to come back. It isn't like we're feeding you. Come and we'll feed you, and you'll show up and just watch the matches. You got to earn their trust, and you got to bring them in with talent.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing when you said when you leave CCW show, I always think that you're leaving and you're like, I wish there was one more match or I can't wait to come back to the next show. Like that's how you leave a CCW event, right? It's like you leave wanting a little bit more. And I think that for me, I think that's one of the reasons why I continue to go back each and every uh, month or whenever I can get to a show. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Something real quick I just thought of. You talked about the last territory, and this is just a little trivia for way back in Eddie Graham. Eddie Graham came to start the territory, bought it from Cowboy Luttrell, but his plans were to come in and eventually invest, and he was one of the main events in Madison Square Garden. And when he came to Florida, but the reason that he actually invested in this, and J.J. Dillon never knew this, and like I said, I saw him a couple years ago, and we hadn't seen each other for 35 years, as Eddie had told me, was and you talk about the territories. We in the old days we never invaded each other's territory.
Mhm.
It's like the Godfathers, and we swapped talent, but you would never run a show in another person's territory. Well, Florida was surrounded by water on 3 sides, and the only thing Eddie ever had to worry about was the north, and that was Jim Barnett and Gunkel and Paul Jones that had that, and he had a business relationship with them, and that's why Eddie invested his money in Florida, that he could only be invaded by the north, and he had that border covered.
That's interesting. So it's his territory was protected. You always hear about that, especially study the um when you study sort of Vince McMahon and national expansion. You hear a lot about how he was doing things like that, going invading territories, and that was kind of unheard of up until that point. It's so interesting that it was a natural barrier that saved Florida for so long.
And at the same time, when you think of Florida now, Nelio and Dan have the same concept. I mean, we know who's in business in Florida, and there's other good companies, for sure, and there's talent, and it's some people, they're not going to travel 4 hours and stuff. So we expand as we go north. We draw some of the fans from that have gone to other promotions. Sometimes they'll find ours better or as good, and there are a lot of other good promotions out there. But you really think about it, Neilio's got nothing from the west, east, or south to chase them.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, Bruce, 49 years in the business, right? At this point. So I think you said earlier, you goal, definitely want to hit 50. Is there anything you haven't done that you want to do before you're unable to do it anymore? I mean, 40, 50 years in the business, I think it's unheard of. I don't think Flair was probably jealous when he passed you in the hallway.
I just know he told me, he says how many, and I was ahead of him, so he got a chuckle out of it. Um, I guess some of the rewarding thing is, because, and trust me, I'm smart enough to know there's some matches out there that get these fatal four ways and different things going. I always make sure somebody's younger in there and stuff. Trust me, I know I'm banged up. I'm not as fast, and I would never take away from a match because of my bad back and stuff. Because I have 5 herniated disc, and years ago, I had broken my neck and never knew it. I found that on MRI a few years ago. That was from, I took a bump from the Road Warriors, and I hit my neck on the bottom ring rope. And, you know, I would never want to slow anything down, but um, I would just want to continue. Like, if I get to the point where I don't referee anymore, I still would want to be involved because, the future is for the younger people, without a doubt. And I see things that are wrong when they're in school, they're learning. So you always want to be able to tell them that, hey, there's this, or like a referee, take the horseshoe effect of the ring. You know, you take half the ring in a horseshoe, you stay there, and when you move forward, you don't turn around, you back up and make sure you're not in front of the roaming cam, and don't turn your ass to the hard camera and stuff. You know, because there's a lot of good referees out there for our company and others, and I would want to know that our guys, if they were really committed to it, they got some of the opportunity I got when I was younger. For I was able to work for WWF, AWA, the NWA, and Savoli's company. I can't remember the name, and one other that was significant back then. And I made it to Texas as well. But I would want someone else to get that opportunity. But just like how I had to earn it,
Yeah.
they should. It shouldn't just be, hey, I went to school, I got this, and that's it. Because you need to be able to carry yourself from the minute you walk in that building. Know when to put your suitcase down and walk over and greet everybody, then carry your suitcase to the locker room. You better wipe your feet in the ring. I'll never recommend you, if you can't remember, to wipe your feet going in the ring, and work for it. And I would love to know that all those people had their dreams come true. But the reality is, like anything, not everybody will,
Sure.
and not everybody will make the commitment. And you know, it is what it is. But there is not room for everybody, so that's the reason it's better that not everybody makes it. But I would just want to make sure whatever I did transitioned, and other people got the same opportunities.
Now, I guess before I let you go here, I've kept you for a long time. I
Oh, no,
apologize.
it's great. I love it, and we got to hook up outside of this, and for sure.
Absolutely. Um, is there any advice you'd give to somebody who's trying to get into the business these days? Like I said, we said at the beginning, totally different business than when you got into it. But is there
Yeah.
any advice you'd give to somebody who's trying to get in now?
Gosh, first of all, have a bio, a resume that is meaningful, and list good companies. You're better off listing less companies, more good companies, and less companies on your resume. Make it meaningful, make it truthful, because social media will catch you in a minute. You say, I worked here 10 years, they'll go back and see that, you posted your first match, or they'll go to the company's website. Um, Man, appearance is everything when you're trying, if you get a break to go AEW, NWA, or any place, man, first of all, be early. If they say be there at 4 o'clock, be there between 3 and 3:30. When you're done, I don't carry the ring boards anymore because of my back, but, I always grab the garbage can. I clean up the dressing room. Do something that gets noticed, and participate with everybody. But that would be it. And you own two things: you own your body and what you're wearing. And the last thing is, don't get an AEW tryout, have a suitcase that looks like it's 15 years old, when you can go to Marshall's, Ross, TJ Maxx, Target, anywhere, and spend $40 and get a suitcase. But you know what? You talk to QT Marshall, and he'll tell you everybody does that stupid stuff. People just continue to do it. So they have the talent, they have the ability, and they ruin it for certain things like that. And if you are a guy and you're going to either a class or a tryout, bring a fountain pen and a paper with you, because you should be taking notes. And there's going to be, 5 people with notepads and 15 people without them. And it's your chance to stand out. So just do the right thing.
Well, that's our show for this week, and I want to say thank you once again to Mr. Bruce Owens, the CCW senior official. He told us stories about Andre the Giant, why he thinks CCW is doing so well, and I just can't thank him enough. Great stories. 2 episodes of CCW Insider from Mr. Bruce Owens. So as always, check out Alive Wrestling every Tuesday on the CCW YouTube channel. Follow us on social media. I'm Minutes to Bell Time on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also follow Coastal Championship Wrestling on those platforms as well. We're going to see you next week, but before we get out of here, I'm going to have Bruce send us home.
Hey, as Gordon Sully would say, so long from the Sunshine State.
You have been watching CCW Insider, produced by Minutes to Bell Time in association with Coastal Championship Wrestling.